Hey everyone, and welcome back to FJ Ranch. Again, my name is Branson, and if you haven't seen the last video where I show off my family homestead and outline the purpose of this channel, go ahead and click the link below. Today, we got the soil test results back from our underutilized and overgrown garden. We took 4 composite samples from each corner of the garden in these cardinal directions. I'll put those results up on the screen, and feel free to pause here if you want to take an in-depth look. If you don't know exactly what these mean, or are confused at the significance of the numbers, don't feel alone. That's why we're going to have a chat with my good friend and fellow geologist, Dr. Steve Adams of Bison Underground. Hey Steve.
Hey Branson, how's it going?
Not too bad, how about yourself?
Oh, very good, very good.
So, if you wouldn't mind, would you introduce yourself to the viewers?
Sure. Hi, my name is Dr. Steve Adams. I'm a geologist, and I am the founder and owner of Bison Underground, which is a company focused on soil restoration. We build tools and develop methods that rapidly restore soils.
So, Steve, what I did with my homestead that you've been to now is I took 4 composite samples from my quarter-acre garden at each cardinal direction, and with those, I sent them off to a soil testing site, and we just got those soil test results back. So I wanted you to look at them with me and kind of tell me what's going on here. Let's talk about some of those deficiencies. What do you see there?
Yeah, so for it looks like all 4 tests, your organic matter is pretty low, even though on a couple of them just being above 1.5%, it puts you, I think, in the medium range. But you're low on organic matter, low on nitrogen, and low on potassium. And then that paired with what we know about the soil, which is that it is sandy and it has a compaction layer a few inches from the surface. But that is all pretty common, I think. Many people are in a similar boat. They might not have sandy soil, maybe they have loamy soil and might have clay soil, but low organic matter and some form of compaction are pretty common, and they are the common reason people struggle to grow what they want to grow.
Okay. So with those deficiencies, you said it was nitrogen, organic matter, and potassium.
Yeah.
Looking at that, does this look like, knowing the history of the soil, what does this look like to you? Does it look like something that's been neglected for a long time?
Um, no, not necessarily. I mean, thinking about the history of your soil, and I think it has a fairly common history that most people are going to have with their soils. So in North America, you have uh, a period um, in the modern era, let's say the last 200, 250 years, where land that people are growing um, gardens in, right? So we'll focus on the homestead and garden scale rather than some type of agricultural, larger agricultural scale. But a lot of land people have their homes on now was some type of potentially some type of wild ecosystem first, right? If we go back to the Pleistocene, like we're geologists and we think about longer time periods, but let's just go back the last million years, right? Pleistocene, it was some type of cyclic climate between dry and cold to maybe hot and humid. And then you potentially had homesteads or early plantations or some type of agricultural land, right? America was fairly rural for quite a long time before large urban centers popped up. Okay, then we have a suburban and urban growth period, and now we have a lot of um, housing developments and things like that. And over that period, soils became fairly degraded. And then now people have those as their homestead or backyard gardens. They went from something that may have been more productive agriculturally to something now that you might struggle to grow grass or you struggle to grow a tomato plant in because of typically over tilling or heavy equipment causing compaction, loss of vegetation. A lot of times, topsoil is mined. It's dug off. It's scooped away by housing developments. Typically, what you need to do is reverse the cycle of compaction and lack of vegetation growing. So that's what we want. So it was growing vegetation. It wasn't severely compacted. It may have had cyclical disturbance from animals, but it had heavy equipment driven across it to put in the homestead, heavy equipment driven across it to lay your foundation and clear your housing development. Whether you're rural, suburban, urban, typically there's been some type of heavy equipment and human activity that has caused the sediments in your soil to be compressed. That compression removes porosity. That makes it hard for roots to go down through it. You can imagine like going to the beach, you can wiggle your toes down into the sand. You pour your beer out in the sand, it's going to soak in, right? If you have more silt or clay in your soil, you can reduce that space. And then water, liquid, air, roots can't get down through it, makes it hard for plants to grow.
In reversing that process, I've just come to ownership of this garden, right? So I am ready to take that step one. So what is something that we could start with today?
Yeah, today, so it's the middle of the summer, which means we don't really know how much rain we're going to get, right? So you can have a typically have a wetter spring in Oklahoma, then we might get some rain back in the fall if we're lucky. So it is difficult to grow plants. In other areas, you might be able to grow some things. In Oklahoma, there are some things we could get started where it's hot and dry. Um, but that's step one is seeing if you can get something to grow, even if it's not the best thing, because you want roots in the soil to hold the soil in place, right? So if you got a bad thunderstorm right now and you've got bare soil, there's potential for it to wash away. So protecting what is there from eroding is step one. Okay. So you don't want to lose anything that might be beneficial in there. You've got 1.5% organic matter. You don't want it going any lower. Okay. You've got a little bit of sand and silt at the surface. You don't want that to be lost. And then step two is trying to break up that compaction and increasing your level of organic matter. And that's uh, possible with tools and soil amendments, bringing in compost, using perhaps the Bison Underground method, which is creating large pore space, large voids or conduits in the soil with tools, and then filling them with organic matter. And then that allows plants and microbial life to get established.
So you mentioned the Bison Underground method. I know that you've discussed with me before that it sort of works like an island for water retention, fungal growth, and bacterial growth. Could you just speak on that a little more?
Yeah. So the Bison Underground method uses a tool to make a fairly large, narrow hole in soil. So something about the dimensions of a soda can, but 6 to 12 inches deep in the soil, deeper perhaps in the future as your soil improves. And then we fill that conduit with organic matter. Now, if you have compaction or compaction layers, the tool pokes a hole through that, and then we fill that conduit with organic matter, right? Now, when it rains, rather than hitting that compaction layer and running off, it is able to go down through and soak into that organic matter. Same with oxygen. Now, oxygen is able to go deeper in the soil column. That means roots can get down there because roots need oxygen. And then that organic matter acts as a habitat for microbial life. So it can soak up water, it can infiltrate air and oxygen. Now we can have life. Okay, so a lot of life needs water and it needs oxygen, especially the type we want in our soil that are going to pair well with the plants you're trying to grow. So now you've got water, organic matter, which is habitat, and air. And now we've got microbial life, and it's in this conduit. So that's the island effect. And then if we're poking those holes every foot apart, okay, now we can establish multiple of these habitats. And then larger biology, right? Are worms, maybe a gopher or a mole or something like that, or plant roots themselves are able to travel between those. And then we start to get our mixing. We're able to move it out away, okay? And then we create a new soil network for life and biology and nutrient exchange, okay? So that's how it works in practice.
So, in addition to utilizing the Bison Underground method, what are some things that we could plant to amend the soil health naturally instead of using fertilizers?
Okay, so for you, let's focus on the deficiencies of organic matter and nitrogen. Okay, so organic matter, we are going to bring in, but you can use essentially non-synthetic forms of it, right? We're talking about compost. You can use uh, leaf litter. You can use plant residue. You can use mulch. Okay, we can use all kinds of things to bring in. Um, Typically, we're filling the holes we make with uh, alfalfa pellets or compost. Then the other, so that's going to get your organic matter layer up. And we'll also add a thin layer of compost at the surface, right? So now we've got our organic matter increased. Um, and because we're putting it below the surface, also, even if you got a big rain or a lot of erosion, it's going to stick around. So now our organic matter has been rapidly increased from 1.5%. I don't know. You could do the math, but it's going to be much higher now. Okay. So now we've got our compost. Now, nitrogen. So, nitrogen is abundant in the atmosphere, but can be difficult to increase in abundance in the soil, right? But there are uh, plants working in a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in the soil that can increase the amount of nitrogen you've got in the soil. So they are able to take it out of the atmosphere and use a lot and utilize it in their metabolism. And then you can take that plant matter, or if its roots are in the soil and its roots are left in the soil, you can take that and then amend other soil adjacent to it. So that's what I do. I take alfalfa, which is a legume, and it puts on a bunch of vegetation and growth. People harvest it, and they typically use it to feed the animals. I can take that and I can amend the soil with it. So what you could do is grow a series of plants. Right, you can grow legumes, peas, alfalfa. I like sun hemp. People like clover. You grow these things nearby, either in the garden or somewhere nearby, and then you harvest those. Now you have your source of nitrogen, and it also comes with even more organic matter. Now you're putting that on your garden, and it typically will break down slowly, much more slowly, and release over time compared to synthetic nitrogen being you could buy commercially and apply.
You had mentioned that the soil here is really sandy, something that I've noticed as well. Does anything about the underlying geology have an explanation for that?
Yeah. So you are on a Pennsylvanian formation. I think it's called the Boggy Formation. And it is a Pennsylvanian rock, I think around 300 million years old, and it has a lot of sand and shale. Your particular area is a higher topographic spot, and it's just really sandy. It's probably higher because the sand is more resistant to weathering compared to the surrounding shale. And so that is your original parent material, your original bedrock on which the soil has formed over the course of probably a couple million years. Um, so that's why it's sandy, because you're starting with a sandstone um, that your property is on. So unless something else comes in, whether it's a river or dust blowing in, or you bring it in and dump it, you're just going to have a lot of sand. And then having a lot of sand means it can be difficult to hold on to water and other nutrients. Like I said, because of porosity, just like you go to the beach, right? Water in sand runs right through it. Without organic matter to hold on to those nutrients, uh, it can be difficult to keep them in abundance in a sandy soil, which is probably why you're low in potassium. So any potassium that was there in the beginning, when it was fresh parent rock, fresh sandstone, if it had potassium in it, it was weathered out by acidic rain, dissolving it and converting the original probably potassium feldspars into clays, and then the clays in that potassium have moved down into the soil column somewhere else, or um, and transported away through the groundwater. So sandy soils have benefits, and then they also have their negatives. Same with clays. Clays hold on to water and they hold on to nutrients, but they're much more easily compacted, um, and they can be very difficult to work.
So how do you get good compaction with such sandy soil?
Yeah. So how do we have compaction in sandy soil? So I had a penetrometer when I visited recently, which is a soil tool. It's a probe. It's a metal rod with a cone on the bottom of it, and it's got a little analog gauge, and it tells you how difficult it is to push the probe into the soil, and it gives the result in psi. It just has a little needle gauge, and so with that, I can poke it in from the surface down into the soil, and as it penetrates down through the soil, it tells you the resistance required to keep pushing it. And at the very top of the soil, it's 100 psi or less, pretty easy to push in. And then a few inches down, you hit a layer that has much more resistance. It's typically 4 to 6 inches below the surface, and it's a couple inches thick. And then once you punch through that, it becomes easy again until you get down to around probably 2 or 3 feet is where it tops out. Maybe we're hitting bedrock, or we're hitting some lower uh, section of the soil that's really hard to get through, maybe a pan or something. So, how do we get that little compaction layer? My guess is there was a small percentage of clay in this sandy soil, maybe like 15 percent. I don't know, maybe somewhere in that range, right? And this was a vegetable garden, and it was probably worked over with some type of rototiller for years, um, and and then rained on, and those clays were just moved down, and you created through the rotary action an accumulation of those clays in that interval, and then they just got compacted. Um, the little clay molecules get lined up and squished, and they just become a hard layer to get through. So that small fraction of clay that was originally in the upper 6 to 12 inches of soil have moved down and accumulated as a layer. And then when you punch through that, then you go back down to those clays as a small percentage being distributed uh, mixed in with the sand, I guess you could say.
So after the Bison Underground method, and we've brought in this compost and created this fertile growth for our plants, how do we keep that sustainable? So, what is the best long term strategy for soil health aside from just bringing in truckloads of compost every year?
Yeah, exactly. So in a smaller vegetable plot, or vegetable beds, or even flower beds, you can bring in compost, especially your first, maybe your second year. But with you, you've got the room for it. What you can start doing is growing your own amendment. You can start producing your own compost and your own biomass and your own vegetation. So you can create a system that is going to improve the year, or improve your soil, year after year. And the way people commonly do that is with cover crops, and then with the Bison Underground method added to that, what we're doing is going to take those cover crops and then use them as the amendment. So, what that looks like in practice is you grow certain plants for a lot of vegetative growth. Um, Both what we're trying to get is a bunch of carbon and a good amount of nitrogen, which means we grow crops that are high in biomass, and then we also grow some legumes to mix in, so we get our nitrogen. And then you can take those, chop them up, and what we do is we turn them into pellets, or you can use them as a mulch to improve the soil. So now your amendment goes directly into the soil, and rather than taking it off site to compost or creating a big compost pile, that material can be put directly into the soil or used as a cover mulch over the top of it. And then it composts and it breaks down in place. And as it's doing that, it's providing habitat and food for soil organisms.
Steve, thank you so much for chatting with me today. You gave me a bunch of new information that I was not aware of, and I think we've got a really good game plan going forward.
Yeah, well, you are welcome. I'm excited to work with you and see how things progress over the next couple of years.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right, later.
So, some good news and bad news there. It sounds like if we really want to make a healthy and sustainable garden, then cover crops is the way to go. So we'll have to do some research into what cover crops can help with our nutrient deficiencies, our lack of organic matter, and also can survive the unpredictable Oklahoma weather. If you have any ideas for cover crops or things that you use yourself, please feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So while we get the garden prepped and wait until the fall for cover crops, let's start working on the chicken coop and maybe get some inhabitants in there pretty soon. So if you're interested in seeing some little chickens running around, or get to watch me do a bunch of fence work, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.